Good morning, everyone. So today we're here to discuss a couple of items that we are seeing in the Judiciary Committee today. We are having concerns, obviously, about the direction that the state of Connecticut is going in when it comes to crime. And at a time when we hear from our constituents over and over again that they don't feel as safe as they did 10 years ago, we continue to see people in this building, certain Democrats, are doubling down on policies to make it more difficult for police officers to do their job and make us safe in the state of Connecticut. Just in the last couple of weeks we've seen, or just in the last week, we've had an Uber driver who was carjacked in North Haven. We had 5 teenagers arrested at the mall with a stolen vehicle, and they recovered 2 illegal guns in that vehicle. We had a carjacking in Naugatuck at a deli, thwarted by a passenger with a hammer. This is not the state of Connecticut we want to live in. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Senate leader, Steve Harding, before we have our ranking members say a few words.
Thank you very much, Vin. I want to echo Vin's statement. I could speak for, I think, both of our caucuses. I know Senator Sampson is here. Senator Ciccarello has done an incredible job in the Public Safety Committee. I know Senator Kissel has worked very hard in Judiciary as well. But both House and Senate Republicans stand with our law enforcement. There has been continuous efforts on the part of the majority to limit their abilities to protect themselves and protect the individuals in our communities. And Representative Candelora just laid out some of the more recent violent crimes that have occurred. And I think many of these cases, they could be prevented. The police officers could be able to pursue some of these individuals in these violent crimes. But our majority here in Hartford continues to put in measures and is doubling down on these measures to prevent police officers from doing their job to protect every single one of us. We are all appreciative of what our law enforcement does for us on a daily basis. I think I speak for both House and Senate Republicans when I say that. We appreciate what they do to protect us. It's about time that we see senators and House members stand up for our police officers and stand against crime. And I'm looking forward to hearing Representative Howard, Senator Ciccarello, and what they're doing to support our police and to prevent crime in our communities. And I forgot Senator Martin, the deputy, as well, because I mentioned everyone, all the senators here as well, has done an incredible job standing up for our law enforcement. So, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Before I start, I want to recognize that we have a bipartisan group of legislators standing up here. We have the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association represented with us here today, in line with the comments I'm about to share with you. The Police Association of Connecticut and POAC, the Police Officer Association of Connecticut president, is here standing with us as well. The reason that we're here is because recently the governor and the Commissioner of Public Safety held a press conference, and to use the Commissioner of Transportation's word, there's a crisis on our highways. That's something that we've been saying for a long time. In 2022, we lost 366 lives on our highways. In 2023, we lost 322. We've been saying since 2021 that a reduction in enforcement is going to lead to catastrophic effects and a crisis on our roads, and now we are here. So we joined the governor in his recent concern over public safety related to traffic fatalities, but we have an extended concern. If you look at the Uniform Crime Report, you'll see that clearance rate of crimes, which loosely translated is the amount of crimes that get solved in the state of Connecticut, took an average of, on average, was 23.42 inclusive between 2013 and 2019. That number dropped 30% down to 16.33 from 2020 to 2022 on average. Traffic stops have significantly declined. In February of 2023, in a Public Safety Committee public hearing, we vetted out these numbers. If you take the calendar year of 2019, you take out the COVID years, and you compare that to 2022, there was a 65% reduction in traffic stops by the state police, 50% reduction in traffic stops statewide. There's no doubt that police departments around this state are low in their ranks. There is a personnel problem, and they are down officers. But police departments run on minimum staffing. So whether those officers are working on overtime or not, minimum staffing is there. And nobody can convince me that through 2019, the state police were running at 65% above minimum staffing. That wasn't happening. Police departments around the state were not running at 50% above minimum staffing. Budgets would not allow it. That's not happening. So that's why we're here today, to extend the concern. And the final one is recruitment and retention. By nature of being the ranking member of the Public Safety Committee, we meet with agencies prior to the short session. I had 3 separate agencies, 2 of them were police chiefs, use the same word to me: crisis mode. We are in crisis mode for recruitment and retention in law enforcement in the state of Connecticut. That's a serious thing, and that should raise everybody's eyebrow, and I know it raises mine and all my colleagues up here. So why is this happening? What is going on in the state of Connecticut? What are we hearing from our police officers when we talk to them about what is going on and why this reduction? Low morale, first thing that comes out. And that's not just me. Back on February 1st, Commissioner Higgins said he visited all the troops, and he said morale is low, troopers are feeling pretty beat up, and many of them are feeling unsupported. Those are his words. I agree with him, and the police officers that I talked to in it unanimously tell me the same thing. They tell me they feel like they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. They say there's a legislature in the state of Connecticut that supports criminals, excuses criminals, and continuously attacks law enforcement. It's difficult to disagree with them, because over the last 3 years, we've seen police accountability, the legalization of marijuana, while we told our officers they cannot stop cars when they see somebody driving down the road smoking a joint. We've hacked out consent searches. We've limited interrogation tactics. We've minimized the effects of juvenile crime. We've erased criminal records on a clean slate. We undercut bond as we know it, whereas we used to commute 6 commutations, 6 sentences in a long period. We did 71 in 1 year, including over 40 murderers. And we made legislative moves last year that proponents of the bill suggested are progress towards removing SROs. Those are the messages that we're sending to our law enforcement. So when they say they don't feel supported, really kind of hard to argue with them. And they ask me the same question: when's it going to end? And sadly, I can't say today. Because as we sit here up in the Judiciary Committee, we're hearing 2 more bills. The governor's bill, in Section 1, creates a new law for falsifying law enforcement records. Apparently, forgery second doesn't apply, okay? If we agree with that premise, and we need a new law for when a police officer falsifies a record, then fine. Because there's not a police officer in this state that will tell you it's okay for police officers to falsify records. So if we're gonna make that a crime, because the sanctity of a law enforcement record we hold so high that we're gonna make it a felony when people falsify it, sign me up. But if you look closely at that bill, it says in their duties as a police officer. And we've learned over the last 10 months from the audit report to Deirdre Daly's report that other people are involved in including things contributing to a law enforcement record. Centralized Infractions Bureau makes contributions. Unsworn records clerks. Some cities have technicians who are not sworn that process crime scenes. We know that dispatchers make entries into these records. According to the governor's bill, if any of them do it, it's not a crime. But if a police officer does it, it's a felony. We can hold police officers to a high standard. I'm right there with you. But why are we narrowing it down to one group of people and then asking them to keep their morale up? We're hearing secondary stops. Again, you have a commissioner of public safety and a governor standing there saying we need more traffic stops. We need more enforcement to reduce fatalities. The empirical data supports that comment. The DDAX report has been around for years. The more enforcement you have, the more compliance you have, the lower speeds you have, the less fatalities you have. Shouldn't need me to stand up here and say that. But we're going to limit the amount of car stops that we do in the state of Connecticut if we pass this bill, and we're going to send another message to our law enforcement that we don't trust them to make good decisions as to who they should pull over and who they shouldn't. We're going to tell them right here from the legislature. Where we go from here now. I laid out what happened over the last 3 years, not to place blame on one significant bill, one in particular bill, or even in particular group or individual legislator. But if we find ourselves today in a public safety situation that we don't want to be in, we have to assess how we got here. And I just showed you how we got here. Can't go back in time and change that. But what we can do as a state and as a legislature and as leaders in this state is pivot and say what we did is not having a great effect. The outcome is not as we wanted to. When the commissioner says he's going to ramp up patrols and enforcement, I had to question it. On July 26th, the former commissioner said that he amended the performance evaluations for his troopers so that the number of traffic stops that they do is no longer considered. When we know we don't have quotas, which is something I agree with, and I know many of my colleagues do as well. So that means if our troopers are going to go out and start stopping more cars, it's got to be self-initiated. They've got to be motivated, and their morale needs to go up. But if you ask 100 CEOs in this state, if they come into their business, small or large, every morning and disparage their employees for 3 years, what happens to their productivity? And I'll bet you 100 of them will tell you it goes down, because they are humans. And law enforcement officers in this state are humans. And sometimes I think that gets subconsciously lost among some people. So how do we get there? Well, first, we're asking the governor to withdraw or at least significantly amend his bill so it's not targeted at one profession. We're asking the legislature and our legislative colleagues to once again reject the secondary stops bill. Moreover, on a grander scale, we're asking our legislative colleagues and leaders in this state to change our course on messaging, continue to hold individual officers who do things wrong and disparage that badge accountable to a very high standard. But also, when law enforcement officers go out and do a very difficult job and do it well, let's hold them high too. We passed a bill here that says that that job is so difficult that they have to have a mental health exam every 5 years to make sure they can still do it. We don't do that with anybody else. It is a very, very difficult job. And shame on us if we're only willing to hold them to a high standard when the 1% do it incorrectly. And lastly, we're going to ask our colleagues to start to consider some legislation that tells officers that they will be protected and supported when they go out every day and do that difficult job and do it well. And let them know that we have their back, just like they have ours every single time that we make that phone call. They have no idea what they're running into, but they're there anyway. And all they're asking for is, hey, just leave us alone for a little while. Not asking for cake, not asking for anything else, just let us do our job. I think it's a fair ask. Before I turn it over to Senator Ciccarello, I just want to stress, I'm not here to blame the fatalities on our highways on a specific bill or a specific legislator. It doesn't do any good. We have to fix the problem in our state. And in order to do that, we have to recognize how we got here. And that is how we got here. And in order to get where we want to go, we have to take a different course. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Howard. You know, hearing him talk, you hear the passion in his voice. And that's the same passion and frustration I hear from the rank and file within my district and throughout the state. But I also hear that same passion from my constituents that are calling me up, complaining that their car got robbed or a family member was injured in a car accident, or worse, somebody was shot. And we see it every day. We turn on the news, we see it every day. You know, I thank my colleagues for inviting me up here. I'm a ranking on public safety, and we're talking about some judiciary bills. But I feel that judiciary bills directly reflect and have impact on the Public Safety Committee, and more importantly, the public safety of our constituents. And we're seeing that. You know, going forth in the speaker list have some benefits. They basically covered all of the things that I was going to say, and were very detailed. But I'm going to make some key points of some of the things that we're seeing, both in district and in the Public Safety Committee. And we're seeing that there's a problem, and we have to ask ourselves why. And in my opinion, it's bad policies. We see it day in, day out, and we hear it. You know, for example, today we're hearing 2 bills in Judish, and one of which is the secondary stops. You know, secondary stops, as they're calling it, is the job of the officer. They need to stop vehicles. That's one of the main ways of getting drugs or guns off the street. Or maybe if somebody is violent and shouldn't be on the street, maybe they have a warrant, the officers will be able to take action. And that's going to stop guns from being on the street, drugs from being in our schools, and we're seeing the wicked effect of the overdoses constantly. That is a way to stop that. And we're going to take away the ability, or attempt to take away the ability, for the officers to do their job. You know, Howard just mentioned, someone could smoke marijuana and drive. So you have an officer pull up at a red light, and there's somebody in a car, and they're smoking marijuana, and the officer cannot pull that car over solely for smoking marijuana. Talk about common sense. We want to make our streets safe. How is that safe? That was in a bill. It was in discussion both in the House and the Senate. There was amendments filed to say, let's fix this. It's a problem. But it was met with no response. That is a huge problem. You know, the governor's bill that we're just talking about, we've been talking about for about 7 or 8 months, and we heard about it a lot in the beginning of that time period. And there was a lot of accusations. And after a thorough, independent investigation, there was not widespread malfeasance. There wasn't intentional falsifications. Thank you, Ben. Falsifications. And it wasn't for, in any way related to the Alvin Penn Act. It was simply clerical errors. But we don't hear about that a lot in the press now. I was just at a town hall in Durham, and there was somebody that's retired law enforcement, and they were saying, well, even though the officers may have did something bad, and this was 3 days ago. So they didn't hear that there wasn't a huge problem. So we're talking about big problems we're having now, and what we're hearing from our law enforcement and the Public Safety Committee is recruitment and retention. How is this bill going to help recruitment and retention? It's not. You have officers, fourth-generation police officers are saying, I do not want my child to be a police officer. And it's because of the policies that are coming out of this building. We need to take action, and now is the time to do that. I urge the governor and our majority to listen to the constituents. There are constituents that are saying we need help. Thank you for your time today.
We'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.